Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be discussing Generation 9 National Dex Doubles, my personal favorite metagame at the moment. This is a 6v6 doubles format, unlike VGC, where you only bring 4 Pokemon on a side. That features all Pokemon in the National Dex, including Megas. You can also use Z-moves. There is no Dynamax, but you can also Terra. However, no Pokemon may do 2 of them at the same time. Um, so this is a very interesting metagame for a variety of reasons, most notably the very large number of options. And the use of Pokemon that are not in SV with SV mechanics is also very interesting, right? Pokemon that are not in SV being able to Terra, Pokemon in SV being able to use Z moves that they never got to because they weren't in SM, um, and really just a very unique metagame that's not really like matched by anything else, in my opinion. It's kind of an interesting cross between like Gen 7, Gen 8, and Gen 9, right? I'd say the biggest closest metagame is probably Gen 8 DOU. Just simply because of like the pace of play and like dynamic speed. However, the SV mods plus Terra certainly change things a fair bit, right? Um, but I digress. Anyways, today we're talking about Stakataka. Now, Stakataka is a fairly interesting Pokemon in doubles, right? Learns Trick Room, one of the slowest Pokemon in the game. Um, has pretty high damage output, right? But it has like pretty lackluster typing. And in other metagames, it's kind of held back by Intimidate, right? Stuff like Landoti, Incin. Um, and Gen 8 it also has Body Press, which is not bad, right? But more generally, you want to be using like physical attacks because, well, you have more moves of that, like typing, right? And then you have stab on stuff like Gyro Ball, etc. Um, but anyways, recently we've seen a very, very large influx in usage of Stakataka and Nat Dex doubles. Now this is like very, very interesting, right? But today we're going to be discussing why that is, and why I think this is probably the best this Pokemon has ever been, which is really cool, I think, for this tier at the moment. Um, so basically, right now, um, there's a tournament called Doubles Derby. We have here the replays and everything. But this is a tournament featuring a lot of other doubles metagames besides just main DOU. And so that includes 2 Nat Dex slots, which is the most Team Tour exposure Nat Dex has ever really had. So we've seen like a lot of new metagame development, and it's really interesting to see, especially stuff like Stakataka, right? Stakataka is historically like not a bad Pokemon. It's typically like viable, but like pretty fringe, niche, someone could say, right? But in this format, it's actually become a lot more ubiquitous than it has in this format in the past, and I think really than other DOU format. And so there's a couple of reasons for this, right? As we see this game progress here, um, there's a lot of things have happened in SV that make Stakataka better. Most notably Terra, right? You're no longer locked into your Steel Rock typing. You're able to like Terra out of your weaknesses. Um, those 4 times weaknesses that used to hold it back, they don't really do that anymore, as you can imagine. Um, and so this Pokemon gets a lot more mileage out of Terra than a lot of others because it's very, very bulky. Obviously, its physical defense is like very, very high, but its special bulk is not bad either. Let's just take a look at the mon here. It has base 61 HP, which is not great, but it's a Trick Room mon, so you're almost always maximizing this out. You have insanely high defense, and your Spadef is also very, very solid. So this Pokemon gets so much value out of Terra because it actually gets to use its bulk more effectively and not be trapped into a typing with 4 times weaknesses. But the other big buff that this Pokemon has received is the item Clear Amulet. That's really what it's running most of the time. This item is most notable for blocking Intimidate, all stat changes, whatever. But basically, this is another thing that has allowed Stakataka to really like break like the confines of like the counterplay it's like seen in the past. So this is the slowest Pokemon in the game, basically. It gets to use a very, very powerful Gyro Ball, and it can't be intimidated now, and so it can still switch in on it, right? But like, you're still taking like a lot of damage because this Pokemon is so slow. But with a certain like EV spread here, right? Like this, we can actually make it so when this Pokemon takes a knockout with Beast Boost, it gets an attack boost. Now, this is what Stakataka has generally run since Gen 7 in DOU, has the ability to get that attack boost and then start outputting even more damage, like sweeping ability. But with Clear Amulet and Terra now, this Pokemon is much more able to do that, I'd say, than it's ever been before. And so that's pretty huge. And it also typically runs like high horsepower, Trick Room Protect. I can't type. But this is a pretty cool set, right? You have high horsepower to hit other Stakataka, Incin, etc. Basically everything that Gyro Ball doesn't hit, high horsepower, can usually hit, right? And Gyro Ball, even like when resisted, is still doing like sizable damage, right? Um, so this is basically the set. And so this is like one reason why Stakataka has seen so much use. We'll go back to this replay here. Um, there is so much that has happened in this metagame where Stakataka would not normally even be able to use these traits, like the Clear Amulet. That's not in Gen 8 or Gen 7. Terra, that's not in either of those gens either, right? And so Stakataka is a really interesting beneficiary of both of these changes, right? And you can't really see this anywhere else. So I just think it's like a very interesting like Nat-Dex interaction. But to really dig deeper into this, right? Why is this a new development? Well, I already mentioned the fact that there's a lot of games being played here. However, the reasons for this Pokemon's like sudden rise are like a little bit more complicated, right? So if we go to the National Dex Doubles forum here, where we are, we're going to take a look at the tiering history of this metagame. Let's see. Tiering log. So this tier has been around for about a year. A little bit longer than that now. And there's been a lot of changes over time. There's, as you can imagine, there are a lot of Pokemon, especially when you have all of them available, that can turn out to be broken. And so this Pokemon, Stakataka, was always like, there was always certain things that beat it, right? There was stuff like Urshifu Single Strike in the tier. Melmetal, when it was legal, was literally just better than Stakataka in like every way. That was pretty quickly eliminated from the metagame. Urshifu Annihilate, a fighting type that is really good into it. And the other thing we have to keep in mind here is that Zygarde is actually like maybe the most dominant Pokemon in this metagame historically. It's certainly like top 3, I'd say, in terms of like impact it's had on the metagame. It's actually still legal. But for a long time, stuff like this has really like been to the detriment of Stakataka, because Pokemon that like matched up well into it were very good. And there were other things going on too. Like coaching was legal. Coaching did get banned after like a very long period of like Zero Aura and Zamazenta being legal, clicking coaching into everything. Physical heavy metagame. Pretty decent for Stakataka, but Pokemon that were at the forefront of that were actually fighting types. Urshifu Rapid Strike, Zamazenta. However, both Urshifu Rapid Strike and Zamazenta's not on here yet, and Metagross, another steel type that competed with Stakataka, all 3 of those Pokemon are now gone, right? Which is very, very huge. Stakataka no longer needs to Terra really quite as often. It still takes it can still do that a lot, right? But it's not forced to as often because 2 of the fighting types that really like were so good into it, Urshifu obviously resisting Gyro Ball is pretty huge, right? And Zamazenta was always at +1 defense and clicking iron defense anyway. So both of those Pokemon were like very, very bad for Stakataka. However, they're both gone. So these are like 2 very, very big metagame changes that have been favorable to them on. Metagross as well, like not having to compete with like another steel type for usage. And so really we're seeing like the effects of these metagame shifts, as well as like all the buffs Stakataka has received. And I think this is like very, very interesting, because we're seeing a lot of it. If we take a look at the usage stats here, let's see. This is for week 3 of Doubles Derby. There has since been another week. This will probably be updated relatively soon, if I had to guess. But just for week 3, Stakataka was the 12th most used Pokemon in that dex. Now this is like this is a big deal. It might not seem like it's like a lot, But if we look at like the Pokemon that are above it, right? These are like all staples of the tier. Rillaboom, Zygarde, Fluttermane, Jirachi, Marshadow. These are like Salamence, Incin. Like these are no one is surprised to see this. However, Stakataka above stuff like Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt for a long time was considered one of like the um, most interesting, like very powerful Pokemon in this metagame. Um, Volcanion, like Stakataka is being used more than like long-term metagame staples, right? And this is like pretty unprecedented. Like we've seen Trick Room throughout Natdex's life cycle. However, it's never been to this extent. Ignore the win rates; these are incorrect at the moment. But still, sitting at 17% usage is a lot. This is very, very interesting, and like a very big rise from like previous metagames. Like if we take a look here at Natdex Premier League, which was previously like the biggest tour I think that this metagame was part of. It was also part of Derby last year. Let's see, it should be an archive. NDPL replays. Let's see. Replays. Yeah, here we go. So we're just going to take a look at this here. This was a very important Natdex tournament featuring all sorts of Natdex metagames, but the only thing we care about here is DOU. Let's see. Cumulative. Okay. Let's see, I guess I just have to go to the bottom. But what we're going to see here is the stack attack is going to be nowhere even close to this high. Let's see. Is this total? Overall, yeah. Okay. So if we look here, we see this same stuff. Rillaboom, Fluttermane, Zygarde, Salamence, Urshifu, now banned. Zamazenta, now banned. Metagross, now banned. Zeraora, now doesn't have coaching. And we're going to have to scroll down a long way before we see Stakataka, which saw 4 uses in Natdex Premier League the entire season. But within 3 weeks of Derby, we've seen twice as many uses. Like less than half the season. Now, this is like somewhat augmented by the fact that there's more games. However, if you like account for like the number of games, this is still a lot. This is like less than halfway through the season. And I think it saw even more usage in week 4. I was just looking, a lot of these replays are actually from week 4, which is not even included here. So while there's more games per week, this is a pretty big rise. Like it was all the way down at like 25 here, and now it's up at 12. Like this is a very big shift. And this has some interesting effects on the metagame, right? Because there are some Pokemon that this outclasses. I was thinking about this earlier. Wild Mega has found itself outclassed yet again. Stakataka is immune to Intimidate. Hits almost as hard because Gyro Ball is a much stronger move than like Iron Head or whatever. Can set Trick Room itself, like, and can Terra. Like Stakataka now totally outclasses this Pokemon. This Pokemon has always been outclassed in this metagame, but it's kind of funny because I was like thinking that when Metagross got banned, this thing would have at least a little bit more usage. But no, in terms of being a slow Steel type, Stakataka is literally infinitely better. So this is just some of the interesting effects of like the rise of this Pokemon, right? Let's take a look at a couple more of these games here. Let's see. And we can be a little bit more creative with our sets here. In this game, very big part of this is Terrafire Heat Crash Stakataka. It also learns Heat Crash, which is basically like a fire type heavy slam. With Terra, it can actually use that, and that can take down stuff like Rillaboom because this Pokemon is like very, very heavy. So that's another interesting thing. This Pokemon's move pool is not bad either. We usually don't see like rock moves on it, but you could definitely get away with that as well. Let's take a look at this game here. Let's see. Wait for the Stakataka to come out. Stakataka gets in, gets to click Trick Room. And now, well, we're just going to see what happens, right? The Charizard's going to come in. The Stakataka is going to click Terrafire Heat Crash into Jirachi. Jirachi has Follow Me in this metagame, making it one of the strongest Pokemon. But Stakataka able to use the Terrafire to dodge the Will-O-Wisp. And now it's just going to run away with this game. It's going to take a bunch of KOs, and yeah, unable to break it. So it's just stuff like this, right? This Pokemon has incredible sleeping potential. Here it's actually Shukaberry. It's not even like Clear Amulet, but it was able to get mileage out of that. Let's see, where did that come into play? Um, let's see. Must have been way earlier than I thought. Oh yeah. Okay, so well, the sidecard's gonna click 1,000 arrows. It's gonna do 20%. So yeah, this Pokemon is a menace at the moment. Here's another good replay, um, where it's just gonna like you click Trick Room here, knock out the Goldango, knock out the Rillaboom, and knock out the Salamence. Like this Pokemon is just we've seen a lot of it. Here's another one from a couple weeks ago. We'll wait till the Stakataka gets in here. All right, Stakataka down 4-5. He clicks Trick Room. Trick Room goes up, and now it just wins the game. It reveals Terra Ghost to dodge the fake out. While it didn't come into play here, it's still like extremely safe, right? It just lets you attack in front of the fake out pressure. Um, can avoid the fake out from the instant again. Clicks Rock Slide this time. Does a massive amount of damage to both Pokemon on the opposing side. And just gets to run away with this game, really. So the other thing interesting about this, right, is that Marshadow is still legal. Marshadow is now probably the next most broken fighting type. Very, very powerful Pokemon. Can pick up really insane numbers on a lot of targets. And obviously it's still a fighting type, right? However, the difference with this compared to previous things that we saw, like Zamazenta, or like Urshifu Rapid Strike, so this Pokemon doesn't really have the bulk to handle Stakataka defensively. Now, Zamazenta would always just click Iron Defense, and it would kind of just be immune to the stack, right? Urshifu obviously resisted Gyro Ball and had like 2 super effective ways to hit it. However, Marshadow, while it can still hit your Stakataka with CC, you can Terra out of it, and then you're going to live comfortably, and then it's just going to die to Gyro Ball, because that's how strong Gyro Ball really is, right? I think it has like some ridiculous power cap. I think it's like, let's see. Yeah, it could be all the way up to 150 base power. And the thing is, Stakataka is so slow that it's really reaching that number on a lot of targets. So yeah, that's kind of a brief explanation of why we've been seeing so much Stakataka. Just watch one more game here. I can't remember if it does anything here. Coil Zygarde, huge. All right, so here comes the Stakataka. It's going to come in. It's already taken some damage. It's going to live this turn. It's going to click Trick Room. And yeah. So this is pretty interesting. Just for Trick Room as an archetype, right? We've seen this stuff before. However, the raw numbers that we've seen from Stakataka in this tour are just very, very interesting. I think this is probably the most viable I've really seen Trick Room, at least in this tier. And I think more so than I've really seen it in just standard SV too, because this is winning a lot of games, and we're seeing it on like a lot of teams that have other ways to deal with it. We've seen it with Gardevoir multiple times. It's a good semi-room Pokemon. Zygarde, Fluttermane, etc. And so it's just very interesting to see, and we'll see where this goes from here, right? It's not like this Pokemon is without counters. We've seen a lot of ways this Pokemon can win, and a lot of people are saying that this Pokemon is like broken. I don't think it's broken. I think there are definitely like ways to deal with it. However, we haven't really seen them. This Pokemon is really taking advantage of where the metagame's at right now. It also matches up extremely well into Mega Salamence, which is one of the best megas in the metagame. Because Salamence can't really touch this thing, because it usually just runs flying moves. The Stakataka automatically just resists, right? So we'll have to see where the metagame goes from here. I think it definitely is going to need to adapt, because we're seeing a lot of Stakataka, and frankly, it's getting away with like a lot of things that it might not necessarily typically be able to. We see Wide Guard Stakataka, another way it could be used, right? It's also interesting. So this Pokemon's flexibility combined with its like ability to just like output raw damage and carry games by itself It's really interesting, right? So many interesting things going on with this one. Hope you enjoyed the breakdown, and I'll see you next time.